they don't know how to get through that initial stage. They come home a little bit sloppy. They don't respond timely. The resume is not top of their game. The portfolio is all kinds of random iPhone pictures which don't look good together. That's unfortunate because they might be great chefs. They might even have the personality that it takes to succeed in a household. They will never get there because they don't get through that initial stage.
Welcome to the Montclair podcast. Today we have a special guest. His name is Hannes Hennches, and he's the host of the Private Chef podcast. Hannes have been working and living in the US, working for some of the most influential families in New York. And he's today on a show sharing with us his experience, his knowledge, the way he became such a private chef, and what he sees for the future. So please welcome Hannes. Welcome on the Montclair podcast. This is Chris, your host, and today we have a very special guest. His name is Hannes Hennches. Did I say that right?
Almost. Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Almost. No problem. It's a pleasure. Hannes, thank you so much for being here. Like I said, I know it's July. It's a very busy season for private chefs. So I hope I'm not taking too much of your time. How did you manage to take a break?
Actually, this summer I was forced into a break because I had a road bike accident just before the Hampton season started. And I didn't cook one day this summer because I was in recovery.
Okay, so are you feeling better now?
Yeah, slowly getting there.
All right. I hope it wasn't too bad, but I mean, on the plus side, you've got a summer off.
Yeah, which I hadn't have in a long time, so that was quite different, And not being in the Hamptons is like a good thing and a sad thing at the same time. You miss something about the summer, but at the same time, it allows me to do other things.
Yeah. So where are you at the moment? Are you in New York or are you in Europe?
I'm actually in Florida.
In Florida. Okay. All right. Okay. Is that where you normally live, or do you live in New York?
No, I used to be in New York for the last 12 years. And this year we just came down to Florida for some time.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Hannes, the way we met, I want to say, is because I was invited on your show once, and I really enjoyed the time we spent and the conversation we had. Tell me, how did you come up with the idea of doing a podcast?
So the Private Chef podcast really came from the realization that I think there's an entire next generation of private chefs, or chefs rather, that aren't private chefs yet, that could probably need some guidance. And I remember when I first came to New York City, I didn't even know what private chefs were really doing. I didn't know the private service industry in the United States well. And I didn't have anybody to turn to. Like, I met one private chef through some catering gigs who was telling me a little bit about it, but it really stemmed from the wish to share all of that information and best practices with other chefs out there that trying to make sense of the industry.
Yeah. Do you feel like now there is actually material online that you can read, or that you can, I don't know, Instagram account that you can follow that tells you a little bit about the life of private chefs, or perhaps a YouTube channel that people should follow if they want to become a private chef? I mean, I know you have yours. You have tons of episodes, tons of guests, and it's really, really interesting to listen to and to watch the show. But do you think there is anything else out there that can help? Is there a school perhaps that is catered toward private chefs?
So there's a couple of individuals like Peter van Ryder. There used to be Dima, and there's a couple like the Estate Management Conference group. There's a couple groups that give you additional resources where you could go, for example, for paid courses or something to really get certifications or skill sets around private service if you want to do. Yeah. But I think before you go there, there's a lot of material out there online now. And some of it comes from the agencies. A lot of them run blogs. Then there's your podcast, there's my podcast. There's a few other, like Nines has a podcast, the Easemakers podcast. There's so much material that wasn't there like 15, 20 years ago. So I think somebody who is a chef or who wants to go into private service, whether you're a driver or you want to be a butler. Oh, actually, there's Simon Simon who has the butler school. So there's a lot of material on YouTube. And I think if you spend 100 hours online, just like with anything, it's like Michael Saylor says about Bitcoin, spend your 100 hours. It's the same thing here. If you spend 100 hours, you have a pretty good idea whether this is for you or not. And I think this was part of my intention, was also to weed out the chefs that don't belong into private service, because there are commercial chefs who belong in the commercial kitchen and not in a private home. And that's like a personality and soft skill thing.
Yeah, I agree, because being a private chef is even though you're cooking, you may cook the same dishes, but the experience you deliver and the daily routine and your life and your skills are so different to what they would be in a restaurant. I mean, you do need a strong background in a restaurant, I believe, to be a good private chef. But there is also so much more that you need to learn as a private chef. And like you said, luckily there is more and more material online, more and more things you can read, and more shows you can follow to get an idea of what it is like. Yeah. Have you ever thought about, or maybe have you been approached by any TV crew in the US? Because I know in the US the TV crews are everywhere and they're trying to catch whatever's interesting, whatever's different.
So actually, the first TV crew that reached out to me was from Germany. Yeah, and so 15 years ago, actually, I did a little segment on a friend's show just for a favor. But then there was another German TV show that reached out to me, and I wanted to highlight the life of a chef abroad. But I wasn't too keen on it. And actually, none of the American networks have gotten in touch with me.
Not yet.
Maybe.
I mean, as you know, there is the yachting show Below Deck. So they started to look into the super yacht industry, and they started to, get their cameras inside and poke people around and try to see what they would do if they were under pressure. And I'm sure they're very good at putting people in tricky situations, because that makes good TV. But I don't know. At the same time, as being a private chef, it would be, I think, very difficult to bring cameras into private homes, because, as we both know, the kind of people we work for, or I worked for, and you work for, they're very private, and there's a reason why it's a private chef gig. It's going to be pretty difficult to bring people into a kitchen of this level, I think.
I don't think a single one of the families I worked for is interested in having any cameras on their premises. Yeah. Same for me. I don't want any cameras in my kitchen. Yes.
Home is home. It should be private.
Yeah.
All right. So how did you end up in the US? Because I think I know you worked in Europe, and, you worked in Mallorca and in different places, which is a beautiful place, by the way. But why the US? Did someone approach you to go to the US, or did you have a friend there, or how did you end up working there?
It was actually quite a coincidence. So I was sitting on my balcony in Mallorca, and I was just having a drink with one of my friends in a break, and we were overlooking the Mediterranean. And I must say, the quality of life I had in Mallorca was one of the best in my life. Like, so beautiful, and it was just a gorgeous island. And maybe in hindsight, there's a part of me that probably thinks if I would have stayed, it would have been great too. But what happened is, I literally got a spam email from the company called American Dream, and it was like green card lottery.
Good name.
And I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. And I just looked at it, and it didn't take much. Like, there was like a very simple sign up. I had to put in some personal information, and I think it cost €50 back then. And I just sent it out. Basically, what they did is, instead of me going through the free US green card lottery, they were kind of representing me in the process, making sure I don't have any form mistakes or something. And then that kind of took its course. I almost forgot about it. I just went about my life in Mallorca, and I worked. And then I went on a trip to New York, got in touch with some restaurants. One of them actually pulled a J1 for me, which then I came to the United
States. What's a J1?
J1 is like a student visa where you basically work in different departments You get the ability to be front of house, back of house, and you get it's like an internship for hospitality management.
Is it like a 6-month program or?
In my case, it was 12 months, but it can be 6, 12, or 18, I believe. So I had a 12-month program. And while I was on that in the United States, that green card thing kept going. And eventually, I basically got picked for a green card while I was already in the United States, which is extremely unlikely. The odds of this clicking in that synchronicity is very unlikely, to the degree where every immigration officer for the next 5 years thought it was too good to be true and had me go to the back office every time I came back to the country.
Yeah. So once you had the visa, once you had the green card, I suppose it was up to you to find a good restaurant.
Yeah. So that J1 I had already was with Restaurant Daniel. So I stayed with Restaurant Daniel back then.
Okay.
But it really allowed me to negotiate differently, because you go from a dependent visa to having choices. Like on a green card, you can move, you can start your own business. You don't even have to work. You have the right to be in the United States even without work. So it gave me a lot of options. So initially I stayed with Restaurant Daniel, and then I ventured out and saw like, okay, what else is out here? And that's also when I started consulting a little bit on the side, and I started engaging with other restaurants, because I wanted to see where else can I apply my skills. And that was like one step before I turned private.
Yeah, I understand. So how many years have you been a private chef now?
So just over 10 years.
10 years, wow. Do you think you would ever go back to a restaurant, or would you ever open your own restaurant?
No.
No for both questions. So if tomorrow there is a incredible restaurant that is looking for a head chef, and they approach you and they tell you, look, we're going to have the best team, we're going to have the best produce, the best setup, come on board.
Yeah, I don't think so. So in the way I think about that is in terms of complexity and a risk. Like I guess if the ownership lies with somebody else, it also means that the equity lies with somebody else, and I don't have any part of the upside above my salary. So then it's kind of unattractive for me. So what if you have upside? What if you have shares in a restaurant or equity? Yeah, that might change it, but I would still think that the complexity of a restaurant, and then it depends on location. Like in example, 75% of restaurants in New York City don't make it through their first lease agreement. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty big number of restaurants that basically go bankrupt. And they just disappear in the landscape of a city. So maybe if you have a better location, or let's say we're going back to Mallorca, which again is highly seasonal, so there's also a risk. It is. The way I think about it is I can probably make the same, if not more money, being a private chef, and I don't have any risk. Yeah. And I can have the same creative expression if I work with the right clients. And I have freedom. No budget limitation oftentimes, which I will definitely have in a restaurant, because restaurants are there to also make a profit. So kind of if I look at those different channels of expression and risk, then I think being a private chef has the higher reward for me personally. And some people want that personal expression inside a restaurant. And the way I put it usually is, I think a chef in a restaurant, the restaurant can be an expression of the chef. But oftentimes when we work private, the menu is more an expression of the clients. It's what they want. It's less about what the chef wants. Yeah, and this is a tough transition if you're not used to that. Yeah, I mean, it's a common conversation that I hear from chefs, and they're like, well, they only want to eat this or this, or they go to the Hamptons and then they just want barbecue and burgers. I'm like, well, if that's what they want, then that's what you got to cook. I've been told once, and it's very true, you just have to cook for your audience, basically. And it doesn't matter if it's your family or if it's the guest or your boss, or you're just there to please them, basically. And I think that's more so true once you're a private chef. Like a private chef cooks to delight their clients, which is the family. So if they want to eat whatever, if it's just bone broth for a week, or they're on some diet and that's it for 2 weeks, then that's it for 2 weeks. And then maybe you need to bring your creativity home to your own household. But if that's what they want, then I think that's where it's important to find the right family. And obviously, the longer you stay with a family, the more fab diets you might go through. Like people evolve. The majority of clients come up with different diets while you stick with them, and then they go back and forth, and then they're vegan in between, then they're keto, then they want you to like really measure all of the macros, and you're sitting with a scale in the kitchen every day, and you're tracking everything on an app for the nutritionists. And then a week later, they eat chocolate cake and burgers.
Yeah. That's hard to digest for the chef, not for them, but for the chef. So how do you find the right family? Do you think there is red flags? Do you think there is things you can fill, or things you can ask before you get hired to make sure you don't engage in a role that is not for you, that is just too specific or too demanding, I want to say, even though that they're all quite demanding?
I think it depends on where you are in your journey of becoming a private chef. If this is your first job, possibly, I don't think you have the luxury to weed out too much. Like, I don't think you're yet in the position to say no, unless it's like a major red flag. But I think that there's a lot of, like, there is those red flag families who at the same time can be the starting point for many chefs that otherwise wouldn't get a shot.
Absolutely. 100%.
So you might just want to stick it out for 12 months, 18 months with a family that has a couple of red flags, because they're willing to hire you, which will give you the experience on your resume. Then, or after those 18, 24 months, you can speak to an agent and you can like, hey, this family has a couple of red flags. You can speak to other employees in the household. They might be able to confirm. I would like to transition to a family that doesn't have red flags. And some of those red flags might be the way they treat people. That's probably the biggest one. Like, there's households that I think acknowledge you as human. And then there's households that see you as a servant in a very demeaning manner. And I think nobody in their hearts of hearts wants to stay in an environment like that, or it could even get slightly abusive, where the language in the household is very foul, where the family has a lot of unresolved issues within themselves, which will always spill over.
Have you been working mostly for American clients? Or do you feel like American clients perhaps have not a better rep, but just a better culture that makes it easier to work within their family?
Actually, 80% of my time was spent with overseas clients living in the United States. So they were either European or Asian, and only 20% of the time was spent with American families.
Yeah. So with this kind of client, how do you stay creative? Where do you find your inspiration? Or maybe you don't need to, I don't know. Maybe you just follow the request from the guest and you just do whatever they want, and it's slightly easier.
I think this is
than making a 10 courses tasting menu every night.
Yeah, I didn't have one client who wanted a 10-course tasting from me, and I'm kind of happy about that.
We'll find you one.
Yeah. And I think I'm attracted to clients that occasionally maybe want a multi-course dinner, but like a more casual family style approach. And I really appreciate working with clients that are sincere about their health and want to use food as medicine or to transform their health, because food ultimately, it impacts your psychological, your mental situation, as well as your physical health. Like, and all the coaches I spoke to, they all say like, hey, like, it's 70% or 80% diet, and the rest is like 20-30% is the workout. And the same is true for mental health. A lot of mental health issues start with diet and sleep patterns. And I think this is where a chef can greatly intervene. And this is something where I like to work. Like, if somebody's sincere about shifting their health, like I'm your guy. And in terms of creativity, I think it largely depends on the families. Like, I've worked for a couple of clients who didn't want a large variety, who were very happy with a more functional diet. but usually the wives wanted a little bit more creativity. And then, there's always cookbooks, there's different Instagram channels that you can, because I think we all have the same issue. Like if we're on that estate, we're like kind of that lone wolf journey where unless we expose ourselves again to other people's ideas and thoughts, which today is very easy thanks to the internet, but that can kind of stimulate the creativity.
Yeah. And how do you bring health into your own life? So what do you do as a chef? I don't know. Do you work out? Do you have a very strict diet? Because you mentioned health and well-being, and I think this is something that is very important for you and for a lot of people actually. So how do you sustain that as a chef? Because chef life is long hours, long weeks, standing many hours in a row, not sitting down, not eating well often. So how do you deal with that?
I think actually it sustains me as a chef. I think, and there is a statistic I keep referring to. So in Germany, insurance underwriters have the life expectancy for a head chef in Germany at like 57 years. That's like the life expectancy that the insurance gives you, which tells you a lot about stress levels, diet patterns, and everything that goes into that statistic, so that you actually die nearly 20 years earlier than the rest of the country. And I think if you want to work on the highest level, especially if you might work with clients who travel internationally, and you need to be pretty fit. Like this is nothing that you can wing. You might be able to do that in your 20s and 30s, but the older you get, you just have to be on top of your game. And I think that starts with having a good sleep routine, and it starts with having a good diet. And for me, it also involves, having daily meditation, having regular workouts. And like once a year, I measure my VO2 max. I get a DEXA scan done. I check in on my system in a way that I know I'm tracking on overall good health markers. I get my blood work done on a regular basis, all of those things, because if I'm mentally sharp, if I'm physically sharp, I can always deliver better food. That's just like if I'm not in great shape, and if I'm not feeling great, that will show on the plate too.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I guess being in the US also helps you get not access to better health system, but just to better option for regular checkups. And I know in Europe we have a lot, but I know there is a few companies in the US that are really, really pushing toward this, using AI and new technologies to check on your whole body, your blood test and everything to really detect.
The interesting thing is,
potential issues.
I'm inspired by them, but I usually go overseas to get the checkups because it's damn expensive in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Fountain Life, which is Peter Diamedis' longevity.
This is the one I was referring to. This is the one I was thinking.
Yeah. I think the annual membership is like $19,000. And not sure what the checkups in itself cost, but it's like, for example, a DEXA scan. I can get a DEXA scan done in India for $30. Or I can.
What is a DEXA scan?
DEXA scan is a bone density test that at the same time can image visceral fat and lean body mass. So you can basically say how much muscle mass you have in each individual body part and how much visceral fat that's in the organs that's completely unnecessary, but is actually highly problematic for your longevity. So it gives you the composition of your body. Which indicates you really like, okay, where can you work on? Or like, for example, I have a low bone density in my spine, which just turned out to be an issue in my road accident because I actually broke a vertebra. That's why I couldn't work in the Hamptons this summer, because I had a surgery in my spine. So those are all things that I like to be tuned in on.
Yeah. Now you mentioned India. I read somewhere that you spend a fair bit of time in India in an ashram to meditate. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there was it was like 2019. I went to India for 9 months, and it was at that stage I was already doing my personal yoga practice kind of on an ongoing basis for like 7 years. And for me, it was really about taking it deeper. There was definitely a benefit, a mental benefit that initially I didn't even understand. So when I started my yoga practice, initially it was purely for physical well-being. I was still working at Restaurant Danielle back then. And I just thought it's an efficient workout. I'm like, this is so cool. I can do it on my mat. I don't need any machinery. Like I can roll out my mat at home, or I can go to the studio, and then I would usually walk through Central Park and go to work. And I just thought that was really cool. And then like a while in, I noticed the mental benefits, because you're actually stimulating the nervous system in a certain way. And I noticed that I'm getting calmer and all of that. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, okay, what would this look like if I would actually maybe live like a monk? Like if you go down this rabbit hole deeper and you take out all of those distractions in New York City that pull you out of that every day again. And I really wanted to experience that. So it basically was a build up to 10 days silence. So at the very end of those 9 months, I did 10 days in absolute silence, not talking, interacting with anybody. The food would just be served. It would just stand there and I would just eat, and everything else, you would not interact even with your eyes. You would just try to keep it as close to yourself as possible without, you would really only move if you had to go to the bathroom. And otherwise you would just sit on the same bed that you would also sleep at night and meditate basically for like probably 16 hours a day.
And what did you get from this experience? I mean, this is incredible. I mean, I don't know anyone that has done that before, and it's fascinating.
I think it took a lot of misconceptions from my life. Like there's a point, so 10 days, you're going into it. Initially, you might feel a little bit of challenges sitting and all of those things, but there was a point within those days where I couldn't tell which day it was anymore. Like I was so deep in the meditation that time became a lot less available to me. Like I couldn't tell what time of the day it was unless I maybe walked to the bathroom. I saw outside that it was either dark or day. And thought greatly diminished. Like we have this constant chatter in our mind, that's all day. It's just going, it's so present that we might not even be aware of it. But if you don't stimulate thought, it actually stops eventually. Like if you have nothing to stimulate thought process, it will eventually subside. And that's kind of where you're going with that. When you sit there, and it's a little bit like, when you have water and you have mud in the water and you stir it up, and all of the mud makes the whole water unclear. And if you just allow it to sit, if you don't touch it and you don't do anything, the water will become clear and you will just have the sediment on the bottom. And in a way, that's what happens. So you just experience a kind of clarity that you probably have rarely had in your life. And it's very profound in the sense that once you've seen that, it just gives you a little bit more perspective, and you can live your life with that perspective forward moving. And at the same time, it's something that I try to go back to every day. In my I do a morning and afternoon meditation, and I try to keep that up as much as I can, because I think it gives me clarity and perspective for my overall life.
And you feel like, but do you feel like this actually taught you how to meditate? Do you feel like before maybe you are not using the right tools, or?
Yeah, I think meditation is a being. It's not a doing. So we can create an environment in which we can consider it, we are meditating, but then it's a falling into, it's becoming. So me sitting on the floor is not meditating, it's sitting on the floor, but meditation might happen. But if I eat, I don't know, 2 big cones of ice cream first, and I have an argument with somebody and I sit down, most likely that's not going to be any meditation, because like the food stimulates me and there's so much mental friction that I have a hard time falling into an actual state of meditation. But certainly once you get a little bit more tuned in, you also know what takes you away from it. And a lot of it, again, has to do with sleep patterns, diet, and perceived stress.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And so do you feel like, because being a private chef is it can be, or most of the time is a stressful job. I suppose depends how much stress you're putting on yourself, because like you say, it's just about being aware of what you do and how you think and how you see things. But do you feel like there is something for you after being a private chef, or have you been thinking about what is not your exit strategy? Because there is no exit once you're a private chef. You're a chef all your life, and takes the way you think and the way you see food. But what is your 5, 10 years goals from here?
I think I would like to introduce more of that longevity and well-being into working with clients, and kind of stepping out of the kitchen, but keeping food a component, because it's a fundamental component of good health. But
you mean like a coach?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the word coach, but I think in generally going into that direction, I still have to define it, what that would look like, but really helping people be their best version. And it has to do with dialing in on their sleep, making sure that they get the right kind of stimulation for their physical health, so that they have great cellular level health, as well as muscular health, as well as cardiovascular health, and mental health. And I think that's something that I'm super interested about, and I think it's a natural next step for me, given that I'm already working with the right clients for this. Like it's nothing that I can do with anybody. It's something that you have to do with people that are sincere about what they're trying to do. And I think a lot of the people they are intense in their own way. They might be the most intense in the music they're making. They might be the most intense in the finance aspect that they're working on. But they definitely have something about them already that took them to another level than most other people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. And also the level of the people that you work for as a private chef, we are working for the elite, for the people that are the most successful, that are overly stressed often and very busy and very, they are everywhere. They travel a lot. They move nonstop. So I suppose this would be something that you could bring to them. And since you already, like you say, you're already connected to them by the food, because you're the one producing their food. It might be a logical path to help them in well-being, and not just the food, because it's all part of the same thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a natural journey I see. So people first would like to get rich or build something big, and that might be because they have a chip on the shoulder or for whatever motivation they have. And then many of them notice that they're not necessarily the happiest or joyful individuals. That's when they're like, okay, now I have the money. Let's figure out how I can be happy with the money. And then once they're happy and rich, they're like, oh, so now I just want to live as long as possible. So I almost feel like it's a natural progression. It's like on that journey of wealth, then you want joy. And once you have joy and wealth, then you want to be healthy for as long as possible.
Hence, you have built something called, is it called the Path to Wealth?
Yeah, the Path to Wealth, yeah.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about this? Because I think it is connected, because the way you spelt it as well, there is health inside and there is wealth together. So it's really connected to the topic. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so it's wealth like well-being. And the idea is really that there is no wealth without well-being. And I think this is something I learned more from my clients than out of my own. Like, if you stand next to people who are incredibly wealthy, but they're either mentally or physically unhealthy, then you notice it doesn't work that way. Like, it literally doesn't matter how financially well off you are if you don't have physical and mental health. Yeah. And so for me, the path to wealth is kind of my own documentation of my journey of making sense of finance and business, because I think as a private chef, and actually any individual should pick up responsibility for where they are in life, in the sense that, use your finances in such a way that in the future you have choices. Like if you want to find the best private chef clients, you need to be able to withstand a couple of months without work. And you only do that by being smart with your finances. Like if you set yourself up for success, then, it becomes easier to find the best family to work with. It also becomes easier to walk away from a family that has red flags. But you need to do some financial education ahead of that. And you also need to do some internal work in order to make good judgment. Like if you know what you want to get out of life, that takes introspection. So that's part of well-being. But you can only do that, and you only have the freedom to make better choices around clients or walking away from certain jobs if you have the financial means to do that. So it's really a holistic way of saying, like, hey, how can we live a wealthy life in the sense that we have health and financial resources to make
what
better
is what
choices.
is the path of wealth, or what is it's a podcast?
Yeah, so it's a podcast that really documents my own financial journey. Like I'm interviewing mostly it's real estate investors and finance, and occasionally it's people about health and medical aspects. But I wanted to document the entire journey for me and others who are interested, and see, like, okay, because initially I came to New York City and I was working for minimum wage at Restaurant Danielle, right? And then I was like, okay, this doesn't add up. Like I can't afford anything in the city. Yeah. Like, okay, how can I go from here to a different income level? And then I did consulting. Then I found out about the private chef world. Then you suddenly make six figures or multiple six figures. I'm like, okay, now I have money, but like, what do I do with this money? And how does this money lead to a better life down the road? And that's when everybody has to become an investor. Like you can't be a high earner and a spender. That's the worst, because you will always burn through your paycheck. So then you might be a saver, okay? But a saver still, you have an issue with inflation and the debasement of currency, basically. And then you're like, okay, you have to become an asset owner, which means you become an investor. You need to have equity either in public stocks or in private companies or in other assets that, at least outperform the inflation. And ideally, you want to do that in a fashion that works for you. And initially, I invested more in private companies, which is a little bit more like startups, which is a little bit more of a roller coaster. And then I was drawn to real estate because it's tangible. But now I have a rather diverse, so I'm not only in real estate, I have different assets. I'm in the stock market as well as crypto. But I think I wanted to document that people look at me as a chef maybe, and some people at home only look at me as a chef. And I'm like making the argument that even if you come from a minimum wage job in New York City, you can become a millionaire. And even if it just takes some discipline and some brain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So so you said you invested a little bit in real estate, you've invested in startups, you're a little bit in crypto. What do you think is, the way I could say it is, where do you see crypto going?
Well, the majority of what I own in crypto is really in Bitcoin. Like I have no idea about many of those alternative chains or coins. I think those are absolute wild cards, and maybe you put, I don't know, $1,000 on 10 of those, and 9 out of them will go to trash. But for me, I see the merit in holding Bitcoin, because I think I'm not sure how many people think about currency risk, because it's for them, it's like it's asking a fish about the water it swims in. It's like, okay, but why would the dollar go anywhere? Like if I speak to some of my friends, they're big savers, and they just hold all of their money in bank accounts, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like you're eroding your entire purchasing power. You have no idea what's happened to your currency in the last 5 years itself, And I think as long as you allow people to print money, they will print money. And I think right now we're seeing that in the US without getting political, but I think the printing press has been abused to buy votes. I think that's fairly obvious. And I think as long as people have these incentives, they will keep doing it, and it will erode the working class capacity to use their money in the future. And I think in an environment where that is a given, see, a lot of people say, "Oh, it's so expensive to run the Bitcoin network because of the energy use." I'm like, okay, but have you ever thought about how much energy it takes to dig gold out of the ground and then protect it for 50 years in a safe, and how much manpower you need?
I think the talks around the energy consumption is based on not much, because if you compare it to a lot of other items that you have in your house, like your washing machine or your microwave, if you pile up all of that together and get a number, you'll see that they are consuming a lot more than other things, and they're only valuable to you because they are something you use. And perhaps it's not the right way to look at it, the energy consumptions. And so, in terms of real estate, Heinz, do you only invest in the US, or are you also investing in Europe, or are you looking at any other countries as well?
So, as a family, we own real estate in Europe, and that's Germany and the Netherlands. But we are also trying to actively sell some of our real estate in Europe and buying more real estate in the United States. And that has to do with regulatory. Like, we actually wanted to build some more multifamily in Germany. And I met with the local officials, and I thought that it's like fighting windmills. And I think for somebody like me who has the choice to operate on multiple continents, I always look like, okay, where do I can apply myself? Where can I row as hard as possible without being chained to something, or like where are the circumstances in my favor? And I think that's the United States. And I think real estate in the United States makes more sense. I think the regulations, the environment is such that we can have better outcomes. And that's really why we tend to, and we are primarily, like, most of what we own is in Texas and Tennessee.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Interesting. And you said you were in Miami at the moment. Are you just visiting, or is this where you have one of your properties, or?
No, this is
a place you like to visit because
this is
Bitcoin friendly.
This year we wanted to be down here in Florida. My wife likes the tropical climate, and anyway, I'm off for the summer. And then let's see where we'll spend the next year.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Heinz, tell me what's next for you, because you build the podcast. How many episodes of the Private Chef podcast have you recorded so far?
We're getting close to 100.
Ah, wow, incredible! So you've got the Private Chef podcast, you've got the Path to Wealth, you've got a couple of investments. What's next? I think you're building something for private chefs as well, no?
Yeah. So right now, it's also because I had the freedom this summer to think about what else I can do with my time. Is I was actually coaching a couple chefs on how to transition from the restaurant world into private, because I think it can greatly accelerate for them to make sense of the industry. So I spun up a website, it's privatechef.cc, like culinary community. And there's a course there, a video course, and there's a blog, and their entire podcast is there, and people can get an idea what it is like to work in private. And then if they would like to, and if they need some help, like I have some one-on-one coaching available where I help people, really get their resumes in order, because I noticed a lot of chefs, they don't have the skill to present themselves well. Even if they know how to cook, they don't know how to get through that initial stage. They come home a little bit sloppy. They don't respond timely. The resume is not top of their game. The portfolio is all kinds of random iPhone pictures which don't look good together. And that's unfortunate, because they might be great chefs. They might even have the personality that it takes to succeed in a household, but they will never get there because they don't get through that initial stage.
So is that what you do when you're mentoring them? You just people get in touch with you and you help them, first of all, understand if this is something for them, and if it's something that they are interested in, you help them build a better CV, portfolio, online presence, and guide them toward the agencies or toward the recruiters?
Yeah. And then also throughout the process, I'm very much with them. Like, or I had a young private chef who got a completely different kind of client that he never had before. And he wasn't sure about the menu and the system. That particular client had a lot of health concerns. So he was very dialed in nutrition. So I helped him set up an entire system around that. And like where we got a printer and we actually made like the kind of FDA printed nutrition labels for every meal because they wanted to go for on the way, so that they were fully dialed in on the macros that they wanted to hit, as well as getting the health aspect right. And I helped him basically work through the entire first couple months of the menu so that he can focus on delivering on the property. Because the last thing you want is work 12 hours and then get home and have to worry about like creativity and macros and everything. So it's like, let me help you there so that you can deliver on ground. And that really gave him the reassurance that he can do it. Because at first he wasn't even sure if he can handle the job. But then I was like, let me be a little bit of help for you here. And I gave him a menu and we worked on a system that got him through the first couple of months. And now he's doing very well in the job.
Yeah. So you were like the private chef's PA. You were just in the background in the office, just typing the menu away and helping him making his life easier. That's good, because I understand that it's a lot of pressure, and it's everything on you as a private chef as well. And it's depending on who you're cooking for and the family you're working for, you can be overwhelmed by, just because they are either celebrities or they are, very famous people, or the CEO of such a massive company. So it's a challenge as well. So you have to make sure you can cook, and if you can take away that stress of making the menu, you can focus really on what matters, and that's the dishes, that's the recipes.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting, and I see different chefs have different challenges. Some know that they can cook, and other have the experience, but they don't have the self-confidence. So then I can just help them. Like, hey, you've cooked for 20 years. This is what you've done. Yeah. I know the principal question you on this, but like you and me both know you're capable of that, and then you can kind of help them through those pitfalls. And ideally that helps them maintain very high paying positions. Like some of these are in the $200,000 range. I think that's really valuable for them to retain those jobs.
Yeah. And the US does have some higher salaries as than Europe. Unfortunately, in Europe, the private chefs are, they're not as rewarded as they should be, I think. But this is hopefully something that will change.
Yeah, the US is a very, I would say, privileged environment when it comes to salaries. But it's also some like that. I think most of those extreme salaries, you also have to give up a really solid chunk of your life, which, to be honest, I also had to do for my restaurant jobs when I first started in Europe. I worked just as much for a fraction of the money. But it's really, people have to think about how much value can they add to the individual that they work for, and what is it worth to them? And that defines their value. So if you can find somebody who thinks that you outstandingly serve the health and well-being of their family, that starts disconnecting you from the market value of chefs. Like if you have a personality that suits their family extremely well, and if they love your food and love having you around, and they trust you with their kids, and they trust you with the kind of just the valuable items in the home, that will slowly start disconnecting your salary from market value. So don't be a commodity, be somebody of the highest integrity, I would say. Be somebody who tries to keep people delighted. Like as long as you delight them, as long as you make sure they feel taken care of, and you never break the trust, and you take care of what is important to them in the same way that like it was important to yourself, I think you slowly start disconnecting your salary from market value. And I think that's also true. It can be true in Europe, but I mean, I think, yes, Europe is a bit more stingy. Like in London, for example, I think the living expenses are just as high as they are in New York, but the salaries are easily 40 to 50% less.
Yeah, this is something I've noticed as well. And this is hopefully by getting together and talking about it, hopefully we can increase that, because the job is the same. I mean, the job is as hard on either side of the Atlantic. Sometimes even harder some other places. If we start traveling east or south, or there's all kind of different challenges that you can face as a private chef.
Anybody in Europe who has a little bit of press or who has done some outstanding work, like let's say you've been the sous chef in a Michelin star restaurant or any of that, those are pathways to get you a visa in the United States based on your own merit. And I think that's a really interesting avenue. Like, so if you had any press in Europe, if you've been involved in any public recognition for a restaurant, or if you've worked for any outstanding clients, whether it's a billionaire or a politician or something, that might be sufficient to get you a visa into the United States. And actually, I've 2 episodes about immigration on that. But it's just as a reference, like if somebody in Europe is upset with their salaries, there is a doorway to the United States. It might take some time, 2-3 years, but it's worthwhile.
It is doable. That's something, you're right. It's absolutely right. It is doable that if you're not, and it's one of the mantra of my life as well, is that if you are not happy somewhere, just move.
Yeah.
You cannot just look at your own, 2 feet and just be sad for yourself. And you have to just pack your bag and look where you can go and walk toward the challenges that you can face, and then it's going to be okay.
Definitely.
All right, Heinz. If tomorrow Bitcoin gets to $1 million, and let's just say you don't have to work anymore, what do you do? Where do you live? What do you do?
I think you'll find me meditating a lot more in the ashram.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
full-time?
that not sure about the full time, but I think that's going to be a big component, because it's such a worthwhile exploration internally.
Yeah.
And I think it really helped me gain perspective about so many things in life that I thought were important. And I think I will spend a lot of time doing that. I'll spend a lot of time volunteering for causes that I appreciate. And I will frankly spend a lot of time with my family, probably.
True. This is something I can only agree with. Spending time with your family, it's the best thing in the world.
Yeah, the thing is, I have no real like. I don't need to go to lay at the beaches. I've been at plenty of beaches, so I think it's really in the juice of life for me is in those things. It's taking care of the people I love. It's volunteering my time for causes I care for, and it's exploring my internal dimension more.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. If you want to share, if someone wants to start meditating, do you recommend a book or something, or maybe listen to a podcast, something to try to get into meditation?
There is an online course. It's called Inner Engineering by Sadhguru.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Heinz, last questions, and then I'll let you go. You have 2 hours with someone, anyone in the world, past or present, to share a meal. Who do you share the meal with?
Might as well be Sadhguru, I guess.
Have you shared a meal with him?
Well, not a one-on-one. I've been around him, met him in person. Yeah. So I mean, in terms, sometimes being with somebody is less about what they say, but the present they are, and I think that's, it's one of those.
Thank you so much, Heinz. If people want to find you, can you tell us? Can we find you on YouTube, on Twitter? What's your handle?
Yeah, so it's actually all of the common, whether it's Instagram, X, Twitter, YouTube. It's always Hannes.
Yeah, Twitter. I can't say Twitter. I can't say X anymore. I think they have to call it Twitter X or something.
Yeah, so it's Hannes Hennches, and that's HENNCHE. Yeah.
All right. I'll put it on the description of the video anyway, so everyone can go and follow you. All right, Heinz, thank you so much for the time. It was awesome conversation. I'm glad we got a chance to chat, and come back on the show anytime.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me and for starting this. I think it's very interesting that more of us share content like this with the private service industry and help people make sense of their journey.
Yeah, and I think I want to also help people to discover this industry, which is, it's a great industry if if you're passionate, if you're hardworking, and if you just want to succeed a bit, if you just want to reach your goals faster. I want to say this is a great industry. Thank you so much, Hannes. I wish you a good afternoon. Right, it's the morning for you?
No, now it's afternoon here.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Hannes. Talk later. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.